Hey everyone, we're Monkey in the Cage, and you're listening to Gamers Table.
Wait, Gamers Table or Gamer Stable?
Gamers Table.
Like a table for gamers or a stable of gamers?
Gamers Table.
Either way, they're awesome.
And don't forget to visit us at monkeyinthecage.com to hear our podcast about gaming, geek culture, and everything in between.
But until then, you have a seat at the Gamers Table.
So it is a table.
What don't you get? Ugh.
Oh, you guys are dumb.
Hello, welcome to Gamers Table, a podcast discussion of tabletop role-playing games, war games, movies, books, and various other game-related topics. Be warned, this show contains some explicit material that may not be suitable for all audiences.
Hello and welcome to Gamers Table. My name is Eric.
This is Mike.
This is Dan.
This is Mark.
This is Jason.
And I'm Sean.
This episode we're going to talk about space opera, role-playing games, the differences between them, the things we like about them, things like that. To kind of set the stage, though, I would like to kind of point out that what a space opera is, for those who don't know, is essentially it's a version of science fiction that doesn't really go into the hard facts or, things like that of science fiction. It's the more adventurous type of.
Would you say science fiction is the backdrop?
It's really just the setting for the story.
Right. Yeah. It's more of an adventure story set in a futuristic time or something like that.
Shakespeare in space.
Yes.
Okay.
Only
Yes.
not.
Anything.
It's exactly like that, but different.
It's juxtaposed with hard sci-fi, which would be your Arthur C. Clarke sci-fi,
Right.
Asimov, things like that.
Okay, so the one that I was thinking of would not qualify. So we would call the Star Trek role-playing game space opera, but Traveler would not be.
It's all.
That I'm glad you brought that up, and you kind of led with what I was going to end with.
Oh,
Good job, Dan.
Not in a bad way though, because
skip to the end.
when it comes to role-playing games, Traveler was the first science fiction role-playing game in 1977.
I didn't realize how old it was until I thought, hey, I'd like to play that. And I was like, wow, that is old.
It came out in 77.
It's a year older than I am.
The year I was born.
So it came out in 77 by GDW, which was an Illinois-based
Game Designers Workshop.
Game Designers Workshop was an Illinois-based out of Bloomington. They designed it, and it was the little bitty books.
Yes.
That is actually their space opera game. Their hard sci-fi game was Traveler 2300. But when you look at it in comparison to today's science fiction games, it would be very hard sci-fi compared to what
I think
is today.
that was the 70s in general. Science fiction was hard science fiction in the 70s, right?
Yes, very much so. 60s and 70s was hard science fiction was like that was the base, and things like
That's why science fiction had such a bad rap for so long.
well, yeah, because it was nerd fiction.
It was
Because
hyper niche.
yeah, you had to be into physics or things like that to be into science fiction. I see that you wrote Dune on the table, Jason.
That was one thing I didn't have in my phone. That's why I wrote it down.
Dune was actually more hard sci-fi than it was space opera.
But it's still space opera.
The movies would be considered space opera, but the
books aren't space opera?
Oh no, the books are a study in ecology. That's what the books are.
I have a clarification on this that might change your discussion. I did some research into this, and space opera goes back to the 40s.
Like
and
Flash Gordon?
Perhaps. Where the term was coined, space opera, is it's the space version of soap operas. It's a romantic
radio
story.
seals and whatnot.
Right.
Battlestar Galactica?
Battlestar would be easy.
They had a little bit of a romance going on. That was 78.
When you're talking about Dune, let's say, there is a very big component of a soap opera in that.
I mean, there's death and betrayal and love and
Like
Backstabbing.
14 Duncan Idahos.
Yeah.
Duncan
I can see your
Idahos,
point.
his
Now-
own dad. And
Yes, the
Not
Flash
quite that
Gordon, all those old radio serials, that was anything but hard sci-fi. What happened was there's been different movements within the space opera genre. It went from this fantasy-like element and then morphed into a more hard sci-fi thing. But then I think somewhere around Star Wars, then it got more into that fantasy again.
And it definitely got mainstreamed. So is Star Trek space opera?
oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
like the original series.
Sure.
Yeah. Because, I mean, really, with hard sci-fi, they tried to explain how everything works.
I
And-
consider hard sci-fi Arthur C. Clarke and stuff like that.
2001.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where it was more about you had to get
The
through
nuts and bolts.
pages and pages and pages of how worked. Then it was hey, they just had to talk to the computer.
Books about colonizing Mars, and I know there's novels out there about that.
Read Kim Stanley Robinson, I believe, is the author who wrote Red Mars, Blue Mars, Green Mars. It's a series of novels about colonizing Mars. Great series, by the way.
Whereas you have the old pulp era, like John Carter Mars, which they're making a movie of. That is space opera.
And more modern
fantasy.
Modern audiences want to see the space opera. They do not want to see the old hard sci-fi.
Right.
If you remember the first Star Trek movie, people can't watch that today. I mean, they if you're a Star Trek nerd, yes, you can watch it. But you try and sit somebody down who's not a Star Trek nerd and have them watch that movie, they're like, ugh.
Now, see, I guess because I'm not a Star Trek guy, I thought the odd-numbered ones were the good ones. Is that not the case? It's the
I
other
think
way
it
around.
was
It's the other way around because
Okay.
everybody loves Wrath of Khan.
I like the first
So
one.
anyway, yes, Traveler.
That was the thing about Star Trek, was that Star Trek 1 was the crew of the Enterprise doing what they were supposed to do. They were explorers. They weren't necessarily space warriors. There was a thing coming towards Earth, and they were like, oh, let's go check it out. And it turned out to be this.
Yes, but the
Hey.
pacing of that movie, you have to admit, is
It's
very
pretty slow.
and
It's-
that's indicative of hard sci-fi.
Right.
But anyway, so we're moving it on to like the out of the 70s and going into the 80s of gaming. You had Traveler, and if you were a sci-fi guy, then Traveler was probably the game that you were playing.
Did we ever play that?
No, but I own it, so we probably should try it at least once.
You own Traveler or you own Traveler 2300?
I own both.
Because I remember Corey. You own both?
Yes.
Jeez. I remember
have
Corey
you met,
had it.
Have you met Eric?
Yeah, I know.
before? Okay.
But I mean, I know Corey had it. I remember seeing it on his shelf with all of his other games.
the little
But
books, yes.
It's not. Well, I think he had it was like a box set.
Oh, I'm sure.
The
But-
original Traveler. It was like old D&D box
Okay.
set.
Yeah, it was a box that
oriented.
you open up, had the little books in it.
But that's not a game we ever messed with.
No,
I
it's
mean,
not.
it was always we were either playing Warhammer or we were playing D&D.
I've always wanted to play
Well,
Traveler.
we could do
Well-
it. There's things about Traveler, and I've got just some snippets of detail about the game itself. It's a 2d6 system where essentially you're trying to roll greater than an 8, give or take.
So we're on the Blood Bowl system, as I like to call it.
On the Blood Bowl system. All right, now here's where it gets funny. The character profile is a hexadecimal system. So
You're losing me quick.
Okay, a hexadecimal system is like your strength, intelligence, wisdom, things like that. You didn't have on your character sheet strength 10 or strength 9, strength 8, things like that. It was a string of numbers that was your character's attributes. Anything higher than a 9 got a letter. So 10 would be A, 11 would be B. So then you'd have a 9-figure thing, and this is this character's stats: 4, 3, 7, A, 2, 6, B.
Jason's bleeding from his nose.
Yeah, it's and I showed it to the guys because I got the books, and I showed it to the guys the Monday game, and Mike and Jay were the only ones to go, oh, that's a hexadecimal system.
Dork.
The only other thing about Traveler that I wanted to bring up is it's an old school of gaming mentality where you have to roll into careers, and some of the other games we'll talk about did that too, but this one almost perfected it early, and your character could die in character generation.
Yes.
What?
I think I remember that. Yeah.
Holy cow.
Your character could die in character generation.
This sounds really, really frustrating for me.
The thing with Traveler is it's not necessarily about your character. Traveler is a
RPG is
exploration.
not about your character.
What it is, it's Rogue Trader. It is Rogue Trader. Like
It's like Rogue Trader
30 years
before Rogue
before it
Trader
came out.
Yeah. It's a lot about space exploration. The game master can create their own worlds, and you can explore those worlds. You can exploit those worlds and take their resources and trade them and all this other stuff. There's all kinds of...
Let's not be negative. You could help them too.
You could, but... you
Heaven
probably-
forbid.
But yes, it's...
Evil bastards.
The Prime Directive.
Yeah, it's a very in-depth game. It's a very popular game to those who actually play it because it's something that...
Everything's popular to those who play
Well,
it.
sure, but I mean, people that I've talked to who play it have been playing it forever,
Yeah.
and then people who are getting into it get really into it because it's such a rich game. I mean, the setting itself is so rich that there are 3 generic systems that use that world. GURPS has their own stuff, D20 has their own stuff, and the Hero system has their own Traveler stuff.
Compounding Hero system on top of this system that you're already talking about is ludicrous. No.
That's so elite nerds can sit back and look at other elite nerds
That's
and
right.
say,
Go,
you're dumb.
You play regular Traveler, well, I play Hero Traveler.
Well, okay, what about Star Frontiers?
Star Frontiers is a very good one. We only played that a little bit.
In junior high,
I had to look and see if that's the
Yeah,
random
and-
thing you got at the auction, but it's not. You got Space Quest.
which is not a role-playing game.
Oh, no, sorry, Star Quest. Space Quest was a Sierra game. Sorry.
Yeah, in retrospect, and I really like Star Frontiers from reading about it from Dragon Magazine and whatnot. I never actually owned it, I don't think. But now looking back,
Who owned it then? Because we played it.
I did.
That was yours?
Yeah.
Have you met Eric?
it was the teen version of Traveler.
Yes.
It came out in 78. If Traveler came out in 77, this was what TSR did a year later.
Probably a response to it, or
Probably more a response to Star Wars.
when Star Wars
the movie
came
out.
Sure. I would imagine so.
I didn't mean to hijack this as the Traveler show.
Traveler
I-
episode.
I thought that would just be a side note.
No, but because there are lots of people that believe that Traveler is the superior game when it comes to space opera.
Well, I knew I wanted to play it. Now I know I really want to play it.
Doesn't this game account for like variations and gravitational pull?
No, that's
and,
Traveler 2300, where you have to figure out the physics of your laser blast. And when you're shooting a gun, you have to take into effect how much variation in gravity there is on that world and things like that. That's 2300.
Gravity
gonna do it.
affects
That's
the
why I've
laser.
never ran that game.
Nope. You guys can play that game. I'll play Mass Effect.
Yes, but you have the ability to make up your own world, and therefore any errors in physics are just accounted for by that's how your world works.
In space operas, though, would that have to do with a lot of space? Because I was reading an article just a little while ago
Like
about
vastness of
the
space.
Dune. Basically, all the action and all the wars and all the fighting takes place on one planet, so they don't consider that a space odyssey or a space opera.
No, not necessarily. Because, another very popular space opera is Firefly.
Well, yeah,
And that...
That's all within one solar system.
but they're traveling from planet to planet.
No,
on that.
Sean's right. All the books take place on Dune.
Right,
Practically.
right. They all take place on Dune. So
If you're talking about
for the hardcore Dune nerds out there, yes, I know he's not 100% correct, but what you're saying is, I know what you're
Arrakis
saying.
is the focus of the plot.
Yes,
we're not talking about the abomination of the Brian J. Herbert / Kevin J. Anderson books that came out a few years ago, or have been coming out
yes,
for a
but
few years.
Eric read them anyway.
By the way, because we didn't get into this in the books episode, but man, that guy must have no pride. He's just like sullying his father's memory.
you're
by
assuming
doing
he
what-
liked his
No,
father.
dude.
Yeah.
This is
He's
true.
trying to make money.
That's what I'm saying. No pride.
My dad was famous. I have no appreciable skills.
Thank God Dad did.
I'm glad you brought that up, though, Sean, because there is a Dune role-playing game. Last Unicorn released it. They released it at Gen Con and then went tits up.
That's not a resounding.
It had nothing. Well, last Unicorn had nothing to really do with.
The Dune role playing game sucking.
No, they were releasing it hoping that it would help. Their waning business, but it
was
didn't.
too little, too late.
Yeah,
Because the book looked good.
and that's because Wizards of the Coast stepped in and bought their Star Trek franchise out from under them.
That was Wizards. That was Decipher. All Decipher really did, they took the last Unicorn system and then made it worse.
The Decipher system was called the CODA system, CODA system, which is a 2D6 system that essentially the game's D20. They just replaced the roll of the D20 with 2D6.
Right.
And that's essentially all they did with that system. Decipher, if you want to get into Star Trek, the Star Trek game.
Are you asking me? Because
No,
I'm going to say no every
you're not.
time.
Yeah, Dad can take a powder right down.
The original FASA Star Trek game came out in '82, and the funny thing about that game is some people consider that to be like one of the best sci-fi role-playing games there is out there. I think that's more of a bias because people love Star Trek, or there are people that love Star Trek, but the game itself wasn't really that great. It was just a percentage base. There's plenty of games that are percentage based.
Yeah.
But Decipher got it after Last Unicorn went tits up, and Decipher ended up losing the rights to it because the brother-in-law of the owner embezzled like $1.5 million off of him. Yeah,
That's why you never hire family.
Exactly. Star Trek has kind of a strange. The Star Trek games
Storied
have this
past.
weird storied past behind them. It's odd. It's almost like like people don't want to pick up the IP because it's like it's cursed.
Who owns it now?
I'm not sure who owns it now. Wizards of the Coast bought essentially the rights to all modern, like, popular space opera stuff because Lucas didn't want any competition with Star Trek or Star Wars role playing game.
Man, he's a great guy.
He's the Puff Daddy of Hollywood.
So wait a minute. Wizards doesn't still have Star Wars,
No.
does it?
I don't.
No,
not Star Wars. No.
Fantasy Flight Games
Fantasy
has
Flight
the
Games
rights.
has the rights to it now.
Yay!
So when's that come out?
I don't know.
There's a miniatures game. They had a game called
You talk about the fighter pilot? Game?
Yes.
Fighter pilot game.
You would like it.
It's it's like World War
Right.
I flying ace game.
Yeah, but now that you get miniatures of Star Wars ships, and it's a ship-based combat.
It's a 3-dimensional ship based